back to the Dialed In Podcast. I'm Mo, and sadly, yet again today, I'm not joined by my horological partner in crime, Gene. He just returned from a 7-city and 13-day trip in Asia and came back a bit run down, a bit sick, and he's at home recovering. So sadly, you're stuck with me, but I'm going to keep it light and fun for you guys today. I'm going to talk about all the things in watches that I don't like. That's the watch collecting community, that's watches themselves, that's complications, whatever. It's just a chance for me to rant and rave about things I don't like. But to just put a disclaimer out there, if I mention something that I don't like, that is my personal opinion. And if you happen to like it, more power to you. The whole point of this podcast and this community is that wear whatever the hell you like and don't listen to other people. You know? So this is meant to be fun. Obviously, snap back to me in the comments if you completely disagree with things I say. I'm sure Gene is going to be listening to this once it's released, and he's going to be pulling his hair out, wanting to roast me on some things I'm saying and refute me. But that's the beauty of it. I got the solo mic today, so sorry, Gene. And as always, there's no barrier to entry here on the pod, only a love for watches. And with that, let's get dialed in. Let's start today with a wrist check. Today I got on the wrist an IWC Ingenieur Automatic 42 in full black ceramic. It's one of the 2025 novelties that IWC released at Watches and Wonders this year. I had the chance to go try it on early April, a few days after it was released, and had the opportunity to buy it. Didn't walk in thinking I was going to, but this thing is amazing. It's I'll be honest, a little bigger on the wrist than I typically go. You know, I'm pretty much 40 millimeters and under. We've spoken ad nauseum on this pod about my dainty ass wrists, but 42 millimeters in full black ceramic. You know, the black is kind of slimming, if you will, and so it wears a bit smaller than 42 would imply. But I love it. It's awesome, and you know, IWC has a history with F1, particularly with the Mercedes Petronas team. And this year, even kind of deeper into F1 because they're a big sponsor and featured in the movie, the F1 movie that's coming out in the summer this year. So, you know, I bring that up because I was actually in Miami this past weekend at the Grand Prix, and I wore this watch, got some cool pictures of it with the track behind it. That was kind of cool. If you want to check that out, go see the Instagram at the Dialed In Pod. But yeah, I love this watch. Side note on the Miami GP, you know, I was sitting in one of the hospitality lounges run by F1 Experiences, and so I had a chance to see some nice watches, and thought I'd recap a bit of it with you guys today. I of course saw a bunch of Daytonas. Right, Daytona is the racing watch. Saw a beautiful platinum Daytona. Surprisingly, saw a shitload of two-tone Daytonas. Not to say that's a bad thing or that I even have a comment on it. I just have never really been in a place where I've seen 10 plus men wearing two-tone Daytonas. They looked good. They looked great. I expected to see more, I guess, full stainless steel Daytonas, precious metal Daytonas. But the two-tone was a feature, at least in this club that I was in. And then a really surprising observation. And yes, I am, you know, I was surrounded by pretty wealthy people, but for that reason, I thought I'd see a whole host of watches, right? I thought I'd see Rolex and Patek, and I thought I'd see a bunch of Royal Oaks. I think I saw 2. But what I did see was I saw 5 people wearing Cubituses. That's a weird word to say. The Patek Philippe Cubitus, as everyone know, came out last year, and so this is the one I'm referring to. The I believe, what is it, 47 millimeter, 45 millimeter Cubitus, not the mid-size one that they released in April of this year in rose gold and white gold. I actually saw 5 different Cubituses on people's wrists, so I got to see all 3 that were released last year. The stainless steel with a green dial, the two-tone Cubitus with the blue dial, and then I even saw the platinum one in the wild, which of course comes on a strap. I don't know what to think about that. I was a little disappointed, I guess. I didn't realize that so many people had gone out and purchased these Cubitus watches, but that was a bit surprising. And listen, I'm kind of a fan of the mid-size ones they released, but a 45 millimeter sort of big boy on the wrist that just looks chunky and just, I don't know, lazy attempt at a new line after 25 years. I was pretty surprised to see how many people were rocking these on their wrist. And sadly, I think it was more so for the flex than anything else. I don't think these people love these watches so much. Like the fact that they chose to wear these watches to the hospitality club at the Miami Grand Prix. I don't know. Maybe I'm looking too much into it, but to me, it just makes me think that they bought it so that they could flex and say they have the new Patek on their wrist. Um, Not to mention, two of the wrists I saw them on were tiny, so they just looked awful on wrist. I'll admit the platinum one I saw was kind of on a larger gentleman's wrist. It definitely fit. It didn't look out of place. It's a good looking watch. From afar. But yeah, thought I'd let you guys know. Lot of Cubitus in the wild in Miami. Another thing I'll mention before I jump into sort of my gripes about watches and the watch community, is the Met Gala happened to be last night. I'm recording this on a Tuesday. You guys are listening to this likely on Wednesday, but on Monday night the Met Gala happened, right? And this is where people go bananas on Instagram over the jewelry, of course, the fashion, and in our little world, the watches. And I thought, you know, just a general comment. And in fact, Gene and I were texting back and forth about this earlier today. He asked me what I thought of the watches. I said everything was kind of expected. I mean, a lot of RMs. You got some interesting watches here and there that I'll mention. And Gene's comment was way too much Jacob. And he's referring to the Jacob and Co. watches that these celebrities wear on their wrists that I don't really believe they purchase. Right? I have a strong suspicion, and I think many people do, that no celebrity actually walks into Jacob and Co. and asks for the billionaire watch or I don't know, that ugly caviar tourbillon that Tom Brady was wearing on the Super Bowl coverage, and I think someone else wore last night at the Met Gala. But yeah, Jacob and Co. is way too front and center at these events, and I guess good on them for having their celebrity influencers and giving people free watches, be it letting them borrow them or actually outright giving them to them. But I don't know, is that working? Are people buying Jacob and Co.'s that are not celebrities walking on a red carpet or covering the Super Bowl on primetime TV? Do people in the wild actually go and buy Jacob and Co. watches, and particularly these like massive bejeweled ones, or like that Godfather themed Astronomia? Listen, I guess there's some cool watchmaking involved, but to me, they're all ugly. It looks like just a bunch of diamonds were thrown up on a dial of a watch, and I know they're all perfectly cut, and only brilliant diamonds are selected. But to me, that's not watch news. That's jewelry news. But yeah, so some of the watches that stood out to me, and some things that I have some comments on are, I thought it was cool that ASAP Rocky was wearing the Bulgari Octo Finissimo Ultra. That's that super, super thin Octo Finissimo that's like 650 grand or something like that. Yeah, I think that's cool. Pharrell, of course, wearing RM as always, but he wore his on, I think he was wearing a RM 7402 on a gold open link bracelet. You're so used to seeing RMs on like Velcro or rubber straps or felt straps, and seeing it on an open link gold bracelet was kind of cool. Here's one that's interesting. So Coleman Domingo was wearing an unreleased Omega Speedmaster, as Omega's been doing at every big event for the last like 5 years, typically on someone like Daniel Craig. They're putting watches on people's wrists as sort of a teaser for what's about to be released. And this one annoyed me. And so I'm going to go on a little rant here, sort of in the theme of the spirit of this episode. So it's an unreleased Speedmaster moonwatch in moonshine gold, which is great. I love that moonshine gold. But it's this, from what we can tell from the pictures, and it was kind of hidden under Coleman's sleeve, but it's this reverse panda dial. with this yellow gold bracelet that looks a hell of a lot like the Le Mans Daytona. But Omega's been doing kind of some annoying things with their Speedmaster, kind of drafting off of the hype of some of the hypey Rolex Daytona models. And in particular, I mean the John Mayer Daytona. That's the yellow gold Daytona with a green dial that John Mayer made famous on Talking Watches. I believe that was 2018, maybe. Where basically, he talked about how rare it is that Rolex would release this colored dial Daytona, and he couldn't believe that people weren't picking it up. And of course, immediately thereafter, it shot up in price. And what do you know? A few years later, after all the hype, and I think at its peak on the secondary market, that Rolex John Mayer Daytona went up to like 150 grand, and then settled somewhere around 70 grand or 65 to 70 grand, where you can pick it up today. And it has since been discontinued. Of course, as we know, they've released sort of a 2.0 of that with gold subdials in the most recent novelties of 2025. But barring that, a few years ago, Omega released their sort of yellow gold Speedmaster with a, wait for it, green dial. And, I had a funny conversation with a friend, and it's a kind of a ridiculous one because I referred to that as sort of a poor man's John Mayer. Now, there is nothing, that says that watch is a poor man's watch. And I mean that colloquially in that, okay, who goes and buys a $40,000 Omega yellow gold Speedmaster with a green dial? Someone who's not getting the Rolex John Mayer Daytona at retail and not willing to spend 70 grand. That was my comment on sort of the poor man's John Mayer. Now, maybe you're just like a crazy Speedmaster enthusiast and you need a precious metal Speedmaster and a green dial, even though there's zero history behind that, nor is green even associated with Omega. Whatever. I'm sure there's some of those cases. But really, kind of a weird move and transparent move on Omega's part to just release that after the hype of the John Mayer. And now, on Coleman Domingo's wrists, we have this, what I want to call knockoff Le Mans. I mean, I'll wait to see, obviously, the press photos when it's officially announced and released, and hopefully we'll get to see more clear photos of the watch. But to me, it's just such a ridiculous thing to do. Like the Le Mans Daytona is maybe a $45,000 or $50,000 watch retail. They came out with it in white gold, yellow gold, and now rose gold. The white gold was discontinued. I believe the yellow gold is now discontinued, and now the rose gold has replaced it. These have each had like 1 year release windows, and so on the secondary market, they're anywhere from like $250,000 to $350,000. And Omega, I guess, is just trying to capture those people I was talking about that aren't willing to pay those crazy prices but want that look. I guess now that I'm saying it out loud, many brands do this, but to me, again, there's like history with the Paul Newman dial and the John Player Specials, for example, in the Daytona range. And I don't really know what heritage Omega is going to claim they're going back into by releasing these watches. But to me, it's incredibly transparent that they are simply knocking off Rolex. And lastly, I'll mention Mr. Shah Rukh Khan, the Bollywood actor. First time at the Met Gala, but global superstar for those of you that don't know him. I won't even be able to compare him to a sort of Hollywood actor because he's kind of 7 of them wrapped up into one. This man is near God in India. He was wearing a Patek Philippe minute repeater perpetual calendar, reference 5304-301R. This is like $1 million retail application piece. And for those who don't know, there's certain watches in particularly the grand complications in Patek Philippe's catalog that are in the catalog that you can see there and say, oh, wow, that's nice. I would like that. And what Patek Philippe will say back to you is, cool, apply. And you have to legitimately fill out an application. And from what I understand, like celebrity or not, everyone's got to fill out the application, has to be thoughtful with their answers, essentially write like an essay about why they deserve and why they desire this watch. Now, did he actually go through that process or buy it secondary? Who knows? Secondary market price is anywhere between $2.5 to $3 million. This watch is absolutely beautiful. It's a masterpiece of a watch, but probably the coolest watch on the red carpet last night. And again, in my opinion. Anyway, that's enough of Met Gala recap. Probably too much time on that, but hopefully that was a little bit interesting. Taking it down one notch before we jump into my gripes with watches. The Christopher Ward new release, the C12 Loco. I think this is a super, super, super cool direction that Christopher Ward is going into. For those who know Christopher Ward, whether you've known about it for years or only really got to know the brand through their release a couple years back, the Bel Canto, they created a chiming watch for under, I want to say under $4,000, but maybe it was just above four, so maybe under 5,000. Either way, unheard of in the watch community that you could get this sort of haute horology piece, and complication such as a chime, which typically go for tens if not hundreds of thousands of dollars, in this pretty cool looking, in quotes, affordable watch. And they did it again with this sort of free sprung balance wheel on the dial side in this Loco. And it's super cool. Like, I don't think it's for me. I don't think I'd reach for that watch a lot. It's a little too much going on the dial, in my opinion. But I 1000% love that this exists. And I think it sort of exposes all of the big brands for how much they upcharge for these complications, and cool dial side complications, I should say, that they make, and they make them limited, and it's whether it's application pieces or just impossible to get, or the barrier to entry on a price perspective is six figures and above. Christopher Ward is kind of shoving that back in everyone's face, and it's amazing. And I can't wait to see what they do next. I can't wait to see this watch in person. I haven't yet. But awesome job, Christopher Ward. And let's see what you do next. I think we're all on the edge of our seat. Okay. Now, let's talk about some of the things I don't like about watches. I'm going to start with something that's kind of controversial. I'm going to take a sip of whiskey before I say this because I know I'm going to get hate in the comments. Okay. NATO straps. Ugly. They're just ugly. Like, nothing about them to me is appealing, attractive. These are cheap nylon straps that you have to have sort of fixed spring bars in for. Super cool at the time when they were sort of used by military, and they were sort of used as a fail-safe in case your spring bars failed. That's cool. That makes sense to me. It was functional. But now people just take off beautifully made bracelets and throw on this kind of ratty nylon sort of, I don't know. It's not for me. And again, as people may know on the pod, I'm not always the most sort of like casually dressed person. It's definitely a casual look. And I think it has its place. I think they look decent on other people's wrists. On my wrists, they look atrocious. I also think that it makes a watch kind of tall, if you will, like wear very high on the wrist because of all the material that goes underneath the case back of the watch. Actually, fun fact about NATO straps. I don't know if you know this, but if you follow like Adrian Barker or follow Bark and Jack, which is his company, which are known for selling these NATO straps, you'll notice that he stopped calling them NATOs. And what's interesting is that this company recently, I want to say at the end of last year, or maybe sometime last year, this company called International Watchman Inc. Trademarked the word NATO. And as a result, a lot of companies have come out and said that this International Watchman company have now been like aggressively enforcing this trademark, basically forcing these long established businesses to comply by changing their product classifications or even business names. There was I think there's a website called cheapestnatostraps.com that's now called cnswatchbands.com. I think Hodinkee now refers to their NATO straps as two-piece nylon watch strap in army green. Um, and I think I can't remember what Adrian Barker changed his strap to, maybe nylon straps or pass through straps or whatever. It's a weird sort of watch world only thing that someone would notice, but kind of funny that someone went and trademarked that name. Um, let's see. Enough about NATO straps. I'm sure I'm getting hate on it right now as you're listening. If you haven't already stopped listening. Uh, what's another thing I hate about watches? 430 date windows. That to me is the horological equivalent of nails on a chalkboard. Okay, the if you have so many things going on the dial, maybe a chronograph complication, subdials for whatever else you need to have, sort of if it's an annual calendar with subdials, anything, and you need to shove a date window at the 430 location of the dial, something's gone wrong. Something's gone wrong. And yes, I'm looking at you, Zenith. Like I think some of the El Primero Chronomasters are actually beautiful watches, but the 430 date window absolutely ruins it for me. There's nothing good about it. It completely throws off the balance of the dial. Not to mention, a lot of times 430 date windows or date windows in general aren't color matched to the dial, and so if I'm generally okay with that if it's at the 3 o'clock position, but something, or even the 6 o'clock for that matter. But the something about the 430 date window, and if it's not color matched to the dial, it's an eyesore. It's all I see on the watch, and to me, it completely ruins anything. Anything to do with the watch. The watch could be stunning, but for that, and I can't look at the watch anymore. And I'll also say that like in that same vein, when a dial has too much text on it, like I get, and Rolex falls prey to this, and many brands in fact choose to like tell you all the damn certifications that the watch has, that it's a chronometer certified or superlative chronometer, and that's awesome and fantastic, and high five to you for your achievements. But like, I don't need an essay on my dial, right? Like it's already, a lot of these watches are hard enough to tell the time on, which is its main function. But after you busy up the dial with the essay you've put on it, it becomes illegible and crowded. And there's something beautiful about the simplicity of a dial. You let the indices stand out. You see what style the hands are. You see the sweeping center seconds go across the dial. There's beauty happening already in any mechanical watch. And the more you shove on the dial, the more ridiculous it becomes. To me, the text, the 430 date windows, really just ruin it. Okay, now going to a different part of the watch. Let's talk about the bracelet. I think this is a common gripe between watch collectors that get together and drink too much and bitch about watches. Maybe something I'm doing right now. I feel for brands because it's sort of like just any social media out there. There's always keyboard warriors who come in the comments and just sort of you know say the most ridiculous things about a brand who's obviously spent tons of time and money on R&D to craft this beautiful watch for a select group of people. And here we are sort of being like, no micro adjust, I'm out. But for real, like a micro adjust seems like something that's not going to throw off the balance of the watch, and it is super super useful, right? And people think about a micro adjust as something that you need to use in sort of in hot weather, right? When your wrist expands. And yes, that is one purpose of it. But I think, the more important one is that not all wrists are created equal. And so, or should I say sized equally. And so when you go to size a watch and you only have the ability to remove full links, right? Or, the boutique will pull some BS where they're like, oh, we can order you a half link, but we're going to charge you $700 for that half link. And by the way, it's going to take 6 months to arrive from Geneva. I mean, the easy thing to do here is create a micro adjust in the clasp so that You size it the best you can by removing the full links. And then, hey, there's another 5 millimeters of adjustments in the clasp. And you're set, ready to go, walk out of the store feeling like it's the perfect fitting watch. And then, yes, in the summer, if your wrist does expand a bit, hey, you got some more micro adjust in there. So, it's something so easy to do, in my opinion. Again, I am not a watchmaker, nor do I own a luxury watch brand. But to me, it just seems like something that's a no-brainer in 2025. And every brand just needs to get on board at this point. Bracelets that aren't tapered. Why? What? Why? I don't understand what you're getting at or what look you're trying to achieve without tapering a bracelet. It looks like you're wearing sort of a chunky bangle, which may be cool for a woman's watch if that's the look. But for a men's watch, there's something that is so clunky about a non-tapered bracelet, and I really dislike it. I think Omega does this on their Seamaster Professionals, which, by the way, another gripe with that watch is that stupid helium escape valve. I understand it has a purpose. It has a purpose and it has heritage, but I don't know how many people for years have been wanting to see that watch without the helium escape valve. Like, at least come out with a model or two where that thing doesn't exist, right? Then you'll see the sales numbers, Omega. They will fly off the shelves without that helium escape valve. It makes the watch weirdly imbalanced. It's already 42 millimeters. You could probably do yourself a favor and trim it down to 40, which I know is harder to do because, you have to actually go in and change the movement. It's not as easy as people think to just sort of downsize watches. But one thing you could easily do is take off that helium escape valve because, one, there's just no one is using it. And two, it's an eyesore. But yeah, back to the bracelets. It's, taper your bracelets. What I don't know what you guys are doing. All right, let's talk a little bit about people looking at your watches. People are interested when you tell them that you're like a watch person or you collect watches or you're working on building a collection or most importantly, I just got this new watch and I'm really excited about it. And someone says, oh, let me see. Right? And then they expect you to take it off your wrist. Now, taking your watch off your wrist and giving it to someone you're putting a lot of responsibility in their hands. They don't know how much you paid for it. This is something that you cherish. And what do? They start fiddling with it. First, the thumb goes on to the crystal. Why? Why are you putting your thumb on this glass crystal? Right? There's no reason to do that. Now you've left smudges all over my sapphire crystal. Okay, that's not an abomination, but it's not great. The worst is when you actually hand it to a watch person. If they like watches too, what do watch people do? They fiddle. So they start to unscrew the crown or start winding the watch. Worst thing they can do is activate complications without asking you. To me, it's just like, you want to see it? Look with your eyes, buddy. Like, I'll put my wrist as close to your face as you need it, but there's no real reason for you to be hands-on with my watch. Now, I'm wearing this IWC I told you about at the beginning of the episode. It's full ceramic. This is super light. I will gladly take this off and put it into someone's hands so they can feel the weight. But that is not to say that I expect them to then, lick the face of my watch or whatever the hell you weird people do when people hand you watches. If someone hands you a watch, hold it, feel the weight, look at it, inspect it in the light, and then give it back. There's literally nothing else you should be doing with someone else's watch, unless you ask them and say, hey, can I activate the chronograph? Okay, weirdo, sure, if you must, but ask. But the fingerprints on the sapphire crystal really annoys me. And actually, in fact, one guy, I didn't even take the watch off my wrist. He asked to see the watch, so I sort of stuck my wrist, out in front of him. And he grabbed my watch and put his thumb directly on the crystal. And, I'm not someone to not say something. So I said, great, now I'm going to be looking at your fingerprints all day. And he goes, no, no, all good. And he took his denim shirt that he was wearing and started to aggressively wipe the crystal, which, no, that's it. No, 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 no. One, denim, like super coarse and rough. You're putting just like these like micro scratches all over my sapphire crystal that, of course, you'll never see, but us crazy watch people may. I may loop my watch one day and see that stuff. And I don't know. Again, like just don't put your fingers all over someone's crystal, and then certainly do not wipe it with like whatever you're wearing. Gross. Okay, what else? What else don't I like? Screw down pushers on chronographs. That's what I don't like. I know they were put on for water resistance, and we all know I'm talking about, the biggest perpetrator of this, which is Rolex with their Daytona models, particularly their modern Daytona models. Now, water resistance is important, but other brands have achieved in 2025 a way to manage water resistance with a chronograph complication. Now, the reason you buy a chronograph watch, presumably, is to use that function at some point. Yes, I know we all have iPhones and we use those to time things that we need if we're cooking or doing whatever. But it's nice to use your complication sometimes. It's somewhat of a romantic experience to actually activate a chronograph on your wrist. Now, to have to screw, or rather unscrew, the pushers while on your wrist is incredibly awkward, and I'm not sure why brands insist, let's call it just what it is, Rolex insists on keeping these screw down pushers. AP is a good example. They have these sort of like non-screw down pushers that provide extra water resistance on their Royal Oak chronographs. It's not an aesthetic thing. It's really just a functionality issue here, that to activate the complication that you bought, you have to go the extra mile of unscrewing it while on your wrist, which, as I mentioned, is incredibly awkward and unnecessary. Let's see here. Watch influencers. I don't know. Watch influencers piss me off. They're always, they're always promoting shit that they're getting paid for behind the scenes and not disclosing it, right? And we're all impressionable people, and you see brands sort of doing these big media buys, if you will, in quotes, where they're just paying like a ton of influencers at the same time to talk about the same damn watch. And, then it's all over your Instagram, and you're like, oh man, like, is this a watch I should be looking at? I didn't even consider this brand, or I didn't consider this model before, but now it's all I'm seeing. And that's the point. I know that, but at least, disclose it, at least make it sponsored, at least, there's tons of shady shit happening behind the scenes with watch influencers. So everyone just watch out for that. All right. The last thing, and I know I'm going way over on this episode, but is limited editions. Listen, I'm all for limited edition watches. They used to serve like a really cool purpose. Like, it would be tied to an event or a big sort of milestone in a brand's history. And, they would be once in a blue moon that a brand would do like a limited edition watch. And it would be important and meaningful. And you could kind of count on one hand how many limited editions had been released by a brand in, a decade. Something about that has completely changed. And it particularly brands that offer, watches that are I would say sub $10,000, maybe even sub $7,000, are the brands that really just like pump out these limited editions. And I guess, you know what, now that I'm saying that, that's not true. Hublot is one of the biggest perpetrators of this. Like every damn watch they release is some limited edition, and it's sort of this like feigned scarcity that you're supposed to like jump up and be like, oh my God, I need to get this because it's limited. No, you don't. It's going to be like 40% discount on the secondary market because all these brands that do this are flooding the market every year with like 10, 15, 20 different limited editions. And it's a ridiculous marketing ploy that I think consumers are starting to get smart to these days. But certainly for a few years there, I think people were buying into the hype of limited editions, and it really takes away from the whole idea of something being limited and special. I think like Rolex doing the Le Mans, that was cool. And I guess we didn't know at the time that it was going to be limited, but then once the white gold one was discontinued, and then now the yellow gold and now the rose gold are both sort of off catalog pieces. That's cool. It's limited. There's actual scarcity there. You have to sell a kidney to get one, but I don't know. That to me is true limited edition. And if you have the opportunity to get one, that's a great achievement. That's a great moment. But all of these other limited editions that brands are releasing are kind of BS. Also being limited for no reason, like the Longa releasing the Odysseus and Honey Gold. I really dislike the stainless steel Odysseus. I believe that doesn't have a tapered bracelet, by the way, so it just looks like a bangle on the wrist. But barring that, I actually think the Honey Gold with the brown dial is beautiful. Still don't love the watch, but aesthetically it's beautiful. And it's limited. It's like 100 something pieces. No reason for that. There's absolutely no reason other than sort of this false idea of scarcity. Last thing on limited editions, I would say, is the limited edition or the limited piece of a watch is just simply a dial color change. I'm looking at you, Tudor. Like, why? Why do you have to make that dial color limited? And is it so special? Like, why does it command a premium from a retail price perspective, and then also obviously command a 2 to 3x premium on the secondary market? There's nothing special about that other than the dial color, not even materials, nothing in the movement has changed. Again, I sound like a Rolex fanboy right now, but like going back to the Le Mans, like the movement in the Le Mans Daytona is different, right? It is altered so that it has a 24-hour counter versus 12 hours on the chronograph. That is objectively cool and different and limited. But simply changing a dial color does not make something special to me. Anyway, I've droned on now. The whiskey in my glass is finished. It's time for me to leave you. I hope you enjoyed this. It was a little bit of a ramble, but once again, I really hope Gene's back next week. And thanks for tuning in if you made it this far. Don't forget to like, subscribe, rate us, review us, follow us, do all the things you do on podcast platforms. Follow us on socials, on TikTok and Instagram at The Dialed In Pod. And we'll see you next time on The Dialed In Podcast.